Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 428 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jaylen Hunter, here at the Unpopular Podcast. And I'm going to ask you to agree with me. I'm asking you to hear me out. I usually don't like to start episodes on a somber note. I don't usually like to start episodes on a sad note, but I wanted to start this episode with a couple of acknowledgments and a couple of rest in pieces, I guess you could say. Let me first start by saying you never really know what someone is going through, especially someone in the limelight, someone that their job forces them to be in the public or forces a bunch of eyes on them. You never really know what these people go through. And while I will never understand suicide, I understand that some people don't have the wherewithal, don't have the energy, don't have the want to continue. And I don't look down on people. I don't shun people that struggle. I just hope that if you are struggling with anything, just talk to somebody. And hopefully the person that you go to has the energy, has the ability to help you in your time of need. I wanted to say rest in peace to Grayson Murray, who obviously was a highly ranked golfer that took his life. I know he was struggling with mental health issues. Again, you never know what someone's going through. And one thing that I've learned, even in my life, that people that struggle, because I've struggled before, people that struggle are able to put on a good mask at times because they don't want their burdens to be put on somebody else. Because when they look at their burdens, they feel like their burdens are are too heavy for them, so they don't want to burden anybody else. I don't know Grayson Murray. Never met him, but I do know that whatever he was going through, I pray for the strength of his family. And the man was 30 years old, which is, I'm going to be 30 in 2 months. So I can't imagine the stuff he was going through to end it. But I pray again for his family, and I do want to say rest in peace to Grayson Murray. I also want to say rest in peace to Drew Gordon, who is the older brother of NBA player Aaron Gordon. Drew Gordon played in the NBA for a brief stint. He also played in the G League, and he passed away to a car accident. Last week, let me say this. The days leading up to this episode really showed how precious life can be and how fleeting moments can be. Again, Drew Gordon is also somebody that I've never met. I don't know him. I pray for his family. But I'm almost sure that Drew didn't expect his life to end due to a car accident. What was it Friday, Saturday, or Thursday, I think. I think this is just me saying cherish every moment that you have, because you never know when God or whoever you believe in, if you believe in anybody, uh, is going to call you home, or is going to all drastically change your life. Um, Again, I pray for the Gordon family. That's another thing, man. I can't imagine having to grieve while being a public figure, because you already struggle with having time for yourself. So I can only imagine, But I pray for the Gordon family. I pray for the Murray family. And I also want to acknowledge the life of Bill Walton. Like I said, I apologize for starting this episode on a sad note, on a somber note, but I didn't want to get deep into this episode and talk about everything else and not talk about, to me, the most important thing, and that is life. Bill Walton was an interesting character. Bill Walton is one of those rare people in life, rare people to ever walk the face of this earth, man. And he was, because of his authenticity, he was able to supersede his sport. People looked at him more for him and his personality than anything he's done in the professional setting. If you talk to a lot of people today that doesn't know much about sports or doesn't know much about what happened back in the day, people will, and the people that do know who Bill Walton is, people will say that he was a quirky, he was just an interesting character. People know about his stance on war and how he was against it and how he was pro-life and how he just embodied authenticity. We don't forget the fact that he is arguably the greatest college basketball player we've ever seen. I think you can go either Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was Lou Alcindor back then, or Bill Russell, or I'm not Bill Russell, or Bill Walton, or flip it. It's up to you. But we're talking, Bill Walton was such a genuine person that the first thing usually people talk about, first, second, and third thing is not basketball. Or the fact that he was one of the best basketball players of his era. If it wasn't for injury, he would be considered arguably the greatest. That's just how great Bill Walton was as a person. I've met him once, not like in a sense of we didn't sit and talk. It was pretty much a hi and bye. I was working one of the games that he was calling, so we had a brief interaction. He was pretty cool. And he succumbed to his battle with cancer. And yeah, I wanted to say rest in peace to Bill Walton. Rest in peace to Grayson Murray, and rest in peace to Drew Gordon, and the countless other people that doesn't unfortunately get the same spotlight that these individuals have gotten because of who they are and their stature and everything. Your life, their life, is nowhere close to less important than anyone else. So I just wanted to say rest in peace to those people as I start. And I did want to give a moment of silence before we just go on and talk about, what's been happening in the sports world. So rest in peace to them. This moment of silence. We've been talking about the NBA playoffs, and obviously we're at the NBA Finals. The Dallas Mavericks overcame the Timberwolves, and we'll see the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. I'm probably going to save my finals predictions and breakdown and everything for Wednesday's episode. This episode, I want to focus on what we saw with the Mavericks Timberwolves series and how most of this and most of the reason why the Dallas Mavericks find themselves in the NBA Finals is because of moves that they've made not just last year but at this trade deadline. I say that it's so important to make the right decisions and get the right people in the room because of how beneficial it is for the long run. And as we talk about how beneficial it is to have the right people in the right room, it's also, I guess on the flip side, on the other end, it can be franchise damaging to have the wrong people or make the wrong decisions. That's kind of the thing that isn't talked about as much in sports, but is understood, that one move, one decision can completely wreck a franchise forever. Now, obviously, forever is a long time, but we've seen franchises that have made one decision or two decisions and have yet, for instance, as much as I don't like bagging on my franchise, is easy because I've lived in a era where most of my favorite teams haven't been good. Now, we've had some teams, like the Mystics have been really good, even though they're not the best this year. The Nationals, I've seen the Nationals win the championship, the Mystics win the championship, the Capitals win the championship. I've seen that. But when you look at something like the Wizards and you hold on to Bradley Beal for too long, or you trade away Gilbert Arenas, or if you're the Washington Commanders and you get Albert Hainsworth, or you trade Champ Bailey for Clinton Portis, those decisions can completely change the trajectory of a franchise. The thing that's so brilliant about what this Mavericks team has done in these last few years is a lot of the decisions that they made should not have worked. A lot of those decisions that they've made should have been on the other end of the pendulum. The decisions that can derail a franchise or derail a superstar. I was never one of those people that ostracized or pretty much castrated Kyrie for his off the court beliefs, his off the court views. I think that a lot of people forget that While yes, these people are famous, while yes, these people are in the limelight, while yes, these people make millions upon millions of dollars, they are still individuals and they are still people that have their own beliefs and have their own thought process and have their own way of processing things. And I think a lot of people also forget to state that we do not know these people. Obviously, because we see them play and we're fans of them, we think that we know them, but we don't. And Kyrie Irving, another thing that I think that people discredit is a lot of times we see these people at young ages. And we literally see these people grow up, mature. And some people, it takes longer and it takes situations to happen for them to reach their level of maturity that they're going to reach. And we've seen Kyrie since a teenager, man. And we also, a lot of fans like our stars, a lot of fans like the people that we look up to live a certain way, and that's just not always the case. Yeah, I do think that it was a mistake that, Kyrie Irving posting the article or posting the documentary that had anti-Semitic viewpoints in it. I don't think the whole thing was anti-Semitic, but it did have viewpoints. And I do think that Kyrie Irving could have handled the situation better, especially. And I said that. I said if somebody feels disrespected, it doesn't really matter what your intent was. It's just what happened, and that's on you now to, I guess, rectify the situation if you want to. So I do think that Kyrie Irving could have handled that situation better, but I hated how people, his name was dragged through the mud, how his reputation was shattered. I hated all of it. I just didn't feel the punishment. I didn't feel the vitriol that came behind that decision was really warranted. And then now people started highlight, and there is a bit of factualities when you talk about how some of Kyrie's stints ended. Whether we talk about Cleveland, whether we talk about Boston, whether we talk about the Nets, they may not have ended the smoothest, but it goes back to the point of you're watching somebody mature. Yes, some poor decisions were made, but you're watching someone mature. I say all that to say, while I was never one of those people that killed Kyrie for his personal beliefs, because again, we don't know this person personally outside of what they want to give us. We don't really know Kyrie, and it's not for us to know Kyrie. He is his own person. I was never one of those people to kill him for his beliefs, kill him for some of the actions that he did that people would deem quirky or people would deem out there. But I was one of those people that was critical and was one of those people that didn't think that Kyrie's move to Dallas was going to work. I was actually very vehement in saying I just didn't understand why you did it, because I didn't think Kyrie Irving was one of those people that could play alongside Luka Doncic. We saw how Luka Doncic has struggled playing alongside stars. We saw him struggle playing alongside Kristaps Porzingis, playing alongside Jalen Brunson. And we've also seen Kyrie Irving struggle playing alongside stars outside of LeBron James. Again, he didn't really work with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Now, yes, obviously they were younger, but he didn't work there. Due to injuries and a bunch of other things, it didn't work with KD and James Harden. So I just didn't think, I thought it wasn't going to work. I just didn't think it was going to be a perfect blend. But the reason why I think it's worked so well, and the reason why I was wrong, is the Kyrie that we're used to seeing, the Kyrie that we saw in Cleveland, or at the end of Cleveland, the Kyrie that we saw in Boston, the Kyrie that we saw in Brooklyn is not this Kyrie. You're seeing a mature, you're seeing a battle tested, you're seeing a humbled Kyrie. And one thing that I know about people is when you see something that you don't have, or you see something that could better you, and vice versa, when you see something, when you're in a situation that can better you and you can better the situation, maturity usually steps in and say, hey, this is where we're at. I can't do what I've done before, because what I've done before has not gotten me the places that I need to go, or has gotten me where I need to go. Let's not get it twisted. The reason why Kyrie Irving is not on the All-NBA 75 team, the reason why Kyrie Irving is not going to help Team USA this year represent the world in the Olympics, is not because of what he does on the court. As we've seen in this series, which we'll break down a little bit in a second, Kyrie Irving is still amongst the top guards in the league. He's still an incredible basketball player. So let's not get it twisted. Kyrie Irving isn't falling off, but his reputation has taken a major hit. Maybe some that was generated by him, and some that maybe was media fueled. But Dallas got a mature Kyrie. And I think that a lot of people saw how the season ended last year and was like, oh yeah, I was one of those people. So I'm gonna admit it. I saw how the season ended last year and I was like, yeah, see, this is not gonna work. And I saw how this season began and I was like, yeah, it's not. But again, we saw a different Kyrie. We're seeing a different Kyrie. And seeing a different Kyrie in turn allows us to see a different Luka. You see, all the stuff that we talk about with Kyrie Irving, you can talk about with Luka in a sense of you can be as great as you are. Luka is one of the best players in basketball. Let's not get it twisted. When we talk about the game of basketball, Luka is one of the best. But even in that, you need to know how to play with others. You need to know how to utilize your team. Because as great as one person is, there's never been a team in the history of basketball that has won a championship because they have one good player and everyone else, and that one good player never integrated everyone else. I don't think Jalen Brunson would have been who Jalen Brunson is now if it wasn't for what happened in Dallas. I don't think Kristaps Porzingis would be as good as he is now if he didn't go to Dallas. But I do think that a lot of those two situations not working was because of the lack of rigidness, or the rigidness, I'll say, that Luka had. But when you see Kyrie and you see someone that has in certain instances have struggled the same way Luka has struggled as far as team building, and you see that, okay, Kyrie is going to dim his light so Luka can shine brighter. I think you see that as Luka and you see that as Kyrie and say, okay, we're going to get this together. And then on top of that, you go out and get key pieces like a Daniel Gafford, like a PJ Washington. Like a Derek Lively in the draft. This Dallas Mavericks team I think because of just how good the West is and just how good teams are and players are. I think there wasn't a lot of expectations for Dallas. Obviously, you had that pocket of fans that said, "Oh, yeah, no, this is Dallas's year." Cool. But shouts out to the Dallas Mavericks for when I think about the Kyrie Irving, even though obviously hindsight's 2020, but when I think about that, when I think about drafting Derek Lively, when I think about having Jaden Hardy, getting Daniel Gafford, getting PJ Washington from struggling franchises, Dallas has made all the right moves. And obviously, as someone from the outside looking in, I didn't think that. And I forgot about Jason Kidd being the head coach. Again, when you have, I think it's so important, and that's kind of why I am so critical of what the Bucks did as far as hiring Doc Rivers to coach a team that has Damian Lillard and Giannis. It's important to have a coach that can get the best out of your best players. Because one thing, again, there's never been a team that has won a championship with one good player. But when you have a coach and he's able to unlock your Michael Jordan didn't win anything until he got Phil Jackson. Kobe didn't win anything until he had Phil Jackson. Steph Curry, and shouts out to Mark Jackson, but Steph Curry didn't win anything until he got Steve Kerr. You need a coach that can unlock the true potential, not only of your star, but of your entire team. And I don't think there was a more perfect pairing for a team and a coach than Jason Kidd in the Dallas Mavericks, especially when you have a star as ball dominant and as good, as crafty as Luka Doncic. And then on top of that, you get arguably one of the greatest offensive weapons at the guard position the league has ever seen in Kyrie Irving. And you have one of the greatest point guards in NBA history as your coach in Jason Kidd. I cannot say enough by how good the Dallas, as far as the moves that they've made, how good it's been to get them here. And if you want to talk about this series, Dallas ultimately beating the Minnesota Timberwolves in 4, all of those decisions came to fruition, and all of those decisions was on Front Street this entire series. Luka being the best player, Kyrie Irving being the best second option. Then you had key contribution from Daniel Gafford. Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively outplayed the bigs for Minnesota, which we'll talk about in a second. PJ Washington hitting big threes. Even when he was, I think there was a few games where he was in a slump. He was still doing what he was supposed to do. Doing the dirty things, getting rebounds, getting assists. The Dallas Mavericks won, obviously, because they have the two best players in the series, or they had the two best players in the series, but they won because they played a total series. And they've been doing that. They did that. And I'm not going to lie to you. I think I had Dallas losing every single stop. I had them losing against the Clippers. I had them losing against the Thunder. And I had them losing against the Timberwolves. So obviously I was wrong. But shouts out to Dallas for ultimately making. This is years in the making. Luka had to go through what he went through. Kyrie had to go through what he went through. Jason Kidd had a couple failed stints as well. I don't know if you guys remember. But this Dallas team kind of feels like, I'm not saying they're going to win the NBA Finals. Again, I'm going to give my prediction. I'm going to give my prediction probably on Wednesday's episode. But it does feel like a team of destiny. Because if you've been paying attention, this isn't just a 1 year thing. This isn't just a 2 year thing. This is the maturation of Luka, the maturation of Kyrie, the maturation of Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. It's been years in the making. So, shouts out to them for making the finals. And essentially, shouts out to them for beating the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that I thought was the better overall team. And obviously, I had them winning in 6. I was clearly wrong. I don't exactly remember what series it was. I think it was the Denver series. When a reporter asked Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, how does it feel now, seeing as though what you've went through these last 9 years? And when I say 9 years, that was the 9 years 9 years previous. That is how long Karl Anthony Towns has been in the league. And Karl Anthony Towns and the Timberwolves I don't think they've ever won a playoff series in his tenure. Actually, they didn't win a playoff series since like early 2000s. So they were asking, how does it feel, finally getting over that playoff hump, finally getting to the conference finals when you haven't done it in the first 9 years? And do you feel like that you essentially have to lose to know how it is, that feeling, And I thought that was a weird question at first. And I'm probably taking that question where to a place that it didn't. The person that asked the question, the reporter, probably didn't mean for it to go here. But I'm breaking it here. When you watch this series, it was clear as day the difference between stars that's been there before and stars that haven't. Stars that stepped up to the plate and stars that didn't. Stars that had a game plan and executed the game plan to perfection, compared to stars and a team that didn't really understand the moment and didn't know how to capitalize on the moment. I agree with Anthony Edwards when he said he still feels the Timberwolves are the better team. If you look on paper, they are. You have a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. You have 2 players that were number 1 overall picks. You have the 6th Man of the Year. You have a great vet in Mike Conley. On paper, this team is better than the Dallas Mavericks. So why did it look so different, so bad for them? There's a couple things. Let me first say, it's important to have a good game plan. It's important to have a smart game plan. It's important to know exactly what you're doing and hope that what you're doing and what your game plan is the best path of success for your team. And it just didn't. It didn't seem like the Timberwolves had that. It just seemed like every single person on the team, whether that's the coaching staff, whether that's the players, were just just a fish out of water. Outside of Anthony Edwards a couple times and Anthony Edwards' aggression, it didn't really seem like anyone outside of game 4, outside of game 4, it didn't really seem like anyone was mentally there. It doesn't seem like anyone was mentally able to step up to the plate. From the coaching staff to, it had to be the game plan, because for some reason they kept trying to run offense. They kept trying to run their offense through Rudy Gobert. Now, I've ad nauseum talked about why I think Rudy Gobert has struggled in the playoffs when it comes to defense, seeing as though he's the 4-time defensive player of the year. I talked about how he has been a liability on defense, especially when you talk about teams that are a little more athletic than him. So I'm not gonna go into that again, but that's defensively. There should never, ever be a situation where the offense is running through Rudy Gobert. Ever. There's a lot of blame to go around. Hell, you can blame Anthony Edwards for a couple of those games for not being as aggressive and obviously not hitting the shots for a lot of them. I would counter that by saying, well, he was the only one getting doubled, so there's really like that's tough. And I do think that Anthony Edwards needs to do a better job at not turning the ball over. He did turn the ball over a good amount of time, but again, the Dallas did a masterful job of playing defense on him, because they essentially were like, yo, if there's one person that can beat us, that's Anthony Edwards. Get the ball out of his hand. Again, Rudy Gobert. Yo, if you're a defensive, I talked about how you struggle playing defense in the playoffs and struggle playing defense against a team that has a player that can draw him out and draw him away from the basket. Well, one of the biggest reasons why I thought that this was going to be a good series for him is because you have Daniel Gafford, or you're playing Daniel Gafford, you're playing Derek Lively, two players that aren't the most offensively gifted. So I just thought that now you really get to thrive in your role. You get to show the world why you're a 4-time defensive player of the year. Well, maybe numbers wise, it doesn't always show, but Daniel Gafford, they killed Rudy Gobert. They were hunting Rudy Gobert. Imagine that sentence, bro. They were hunting the 4-time defensive player of the year in the paint. I don't know how many times this series Kyrie Irving or Luka Doncic got an easy lob to Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford in clutch situations. Like, they were destroying. If there was a power ranking at the end of the series now, it would probably be Luka, it would be Kyrie, it would be, I'll say Anthony Edwards, and then Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. Like, the better players were on Dallas, even though if you look on paper, now I know the game isn't played on paper, but if you look on paper, Minnesota had the better team. So I do think it was the coaching staff. I think that the game plan that they had, some of the X's and O plays that they made just weren't successful, especially when you see that your best player in Anthony Edwards continues to get double teamed. I think that, and I talked about this before, in playoff series, they're going to expose your weakest aspects. They're going to expose your weak points. And a weak point for the Timberwolves is when they're firing on all cylinders, it's very hard to beat them. When you have, people hitting threes and people hitting, they were the best defensive team in the league this season. So when you have that defense along with the offense, it's damn near unstoppable. The issue was you don't really get the offense that much because outside of Anthony Edwards and maybe Karl Anthony Towns, you don't have a player that can consistently get his own shot. You don't have a player that can, let me back up. Outside of Anthony Edwards, you don't have a player that can consistently put the ball on the ground and go get theirs. So, and on top of that, you really don't have any shooters either. Your best shooter is Mike Conley. Jaden McDaniels was having a phenomenal playoffs until he got to, or shooting wise, until he got to Dallas, or they played Dallas. I'm going to wait. Your best shooters is Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley. So they don't really have any shooting. So this team, is a good team, don't get me wrong, but I just think that I've said this before, that a playoff series is going to expose you for who you are and who you're not. And a good team is going to exploit what you're not. And Dallas understood this team is not a good shooting team. So why are we're not going to run out on threes like that. We're going to pack the paint and we're going to make them hit tough shots. And eventually we have better tough shot makers than they do. That's essentially how they won. And we know that if their defense can be good, but their defense are in spurts. If we get them in foul trouble, if you get Jaden McDaniels in foul trouble, if you get Anthony Edwards in foul trouble, it's going to be a long day for this team. And the game plan that the Timberwolves had was horrible. The game plan that Dallas had was perfect. And as you see, one of them is still going. One of them is at home. I referenced that question that the reporter asked both Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns a few minutes ago. And I'm going to bring it back to here. And this is the last portion I'm going to talk about this series. We talked about the blame. If you're talking about a blame pie, we gave out the slice for the coaching staff and the game plan. We gave out the slice to just the team in general, seeing as though there were limitations that their defense was able to overcome. Well, it was not able to overcome it in this series. I even gave the slice to Anthony Edwards, seeing as though he's young and it does take time to mature in the playoffs, because the playoffs is a much different animal than the regular season. The question was, does this playoff run extinguish all those 9 years? And while, again, like I said, I don't think the reporter was taking it here. That's where I'm going to take. This is where I'm going to take it. If you're wondering why there was such a lack of success for the Minnesota Timberwolves those 9 years that Karl Anthony Towns was there pretty much as the number one option, this series should have showed you. It's not all Karl Anthony Towns' fault, but he is a major key to why the Timberwolves ultimately didn't advance to the finals. Gilbert Arenas in his podcast talked about this. And these are people that have obviously been in playoff series, been in the trenches. You have him, you have Brandon Jennings, you have Lexi Brown, you have Rashad McCant, Kenyon Martin, all very established players for their time. And they said something that I said. Now, this isn't me tooting my own horn, but this is me acknowledging that every series is different. Now, that's obviously the oversimplification of what I'm saying, but every series is different, meaning there's going to be a series where one player may thrive more than the other. There's going to be series where one player is more important than the other. It's all about matchups. And the best teams are able to find the mismatches and exploit those mismatches. I said going into this series that Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels are going to have their hands full with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. That was true. I said he should be able to feast as far as defensively, but there should be no one in this God-given earth that thinks that Rudy Gobert can carry you offensively. No one. There also should be no one that thinks that at his age, and even in his prime, Mike Conley wasn't a number one option. Mike Conley's good, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't a number one option. I said, and the Gilbert Arenas podcast, shouts out to them, they said as well, this series is supposed to be Karl Anthony Towns series. When you look at the matchup that's in front of you, PJ Washington, you should dominate that matchup. One of those players, PJ Washington and Karl Anthony Towns, one of them is a former number one overall pick. One of them is a 5-star recruit that went to Kentucky. Oh, they both did. But one of them has the skill set to be a number one overall pick, has a skill set to be a superstar. One of them does not. Doesn't mean that PJ Washington is trash, but when we talk about skill level, I don't think there's anyone that would think that PJ Washington is a better basketball player than Karl Anthony Towns. The question was, does this playoff run negate those 9 years? And I think it hit me. This is why. This is why Karl Anthony Towns cannot be a number one option. This is why Karl Anthony Towns cannot be trusted in these moments. It's not just because they lost. It's not just because I think he's a major reason why he lost. It's the fact of you're not a rookie anymore. 9 years, you're essentially a vet. Not essentially, you are a vet. Meaning, you shouldn't be you shouldn't be making rookie mistakes. You shouldn't be doing rookie things. Like rookie fouls. Fouling at the wrong moment. Fouling, it's just stupid foul. And Karl Anthony Towns is full of that. Or the fact of you're like 7 feet tall. And you're playing against a player in PJ Washington who's 6'9", 6'10". And for some reason, you continue to jack threes. I understand that you self-proclaim yourself as the greatest big man shooter to ever live. Cool. The Timberwolves don't need that in this series. They need the Karl Anthony Towns that can get his ass in the paint, like Charles Barkley said, like Shaq said in the Inside the NBA crew. Get your ass in the paint, bro. You are the mismatch. This should be your series. Why are you taking 30-something threes? And hitting like 7 of them. I think it's been proven that if Karl-Anthony Towns is your best player, you have no shot at winning a championship. And a lot of people don't understand what that means. Usually, the team adopts the identity, adopts the personality of your best player. And Karl-Anthony Towns has been the Timberwolves' best players before Anthony Edwards got there. And it's no coincidence that there has not been any success for the Timberwolves when Karl-Anthony Towns is their best player. And I'm starting to feel that if Karl-Anthony Towns is your second best player, you may not be a championship caliber team. Don't get me wrong, man. Karl-Anthony Towns is a fine basketball player. He had a 60-plus point game this year. He can score with the best of them. He is a great shooter when he is hitting shots. So he could be a great defender. He was one of the main reasons why they won against the Timberwolves. Against the Denver Nuggets. His defense on Jokic, even though Jokic was killing him and killing Rudy Gobert, but in key moments, his defense on Jokic is kind of what changed the series and changed that game 7 when they were already down 20 and they started hitting. So I'm not saying that Karl-Anthony Towns isn't a good basketball player, but what I'm saying is Karl-Anthony Towns has proven with some of the dumb fouls that he does, some of the erratic moves that he does, he cannot be a player that you build a franchise around. And I'm starting to think that, because wasn't it last year which he also struggled mightily in the playoffs? Now, yes, eventually it was against the Nuggets who eventually won the championship. But didn't he struggle again? A series that should have, because yes, you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything against against Jokic. But isn't that yet another advantage, at least offensively, that Karl-Anthony Towns has? Because Jokic doesn't play no defense. And I would like to think that Karl-Anthony Towns is a better player than Andrew Gordon or Aaron Gordon. But yet again, that's yet another matchup that he lost. I'm not saying they have to trade Karl-Anthony Towns. But what I'm saying is Karl-Anthony Towns he's shown the ability to be a good basketball player. He has not shown the ability to be a first or even second option on a championship caliber team. We all thought that the Minnesota Timberwolves were a championship caliber team, seeing as though they beat the Suns, they beat the reigning champions or the defending champions in the Nuggets. But when you ran up against a team that you should have dominated, what do they say? You can't teach a new dog old trick, or an old dog new tricks. The old Karl-Anthony Towns popped his ugly head, complaining to the refs, missing shots, flailing at the rim. He didn't start really hitting rim. He could be injured, I don't know, but he didn't start hitting them layups until game 4 and 5. So, and the very last thing I'm gonna say, because I realize I've been talking about this joint for like 40 minutes. The very last thing I'm gonna say is, you hear it just like you hear all the other time. You heard this with the Bengals, which we're going to talk about a little bit in a second. You hear about all the young teams. They'll be back. And this is just me giving a friendly reminder that we don't know. This is another reason why I'm not saying to trade him, but I think that you have to explore it. This Minnesota Timberwolves team is about to get extremely expensive, extremely fast. I think Anthony Edwards' extension is about to kick in. Jaden McDaniels' extension is about to kick in. Rudy Gobert is about to be expensive. Karl Anthony Towns is about to be expensive. Nas Reed is about to be expensive. To me, kind of like what's going on with Golden State right now, you can't justify paying all these huge contracts and not reaching your ultimate goal, which is a championship. The thing that's giving Golden State grace right now is obviously they were a dynasty. They had 4 championships. And they also have a top 10 player of all time, arguably, in Steph Curry. And arguably the greatest trio of all time in Steph, Clay, and Dre. But the Minnesota Timberwolves don't have that luxury. So I'm not saying trade Karl Anthony Towns. What I'm saying is you have to explore it because this team is going to get expensive. And one thing I do know about NBA championships, usually extremely expensive teams either win it that year or they don't win it at all. Want a perfect example? Look at the Suns. I think the Suns had one of the, if not the highest or most expensive team in the league. I think Golden State was up there too. Look where they got. That's why I think you're going to see a lot of changes with the Heat as well because they're about to get expensive, especially when you look at Jimmy Butler. So for all those people that's saying Minnesota will be back, I think Anthony Edwards is a fine basketball player. I think Anthony Edwards has the ability to be arguably a top 5, top 10 player in this league, maybe even next year. I don't think that this team that's currently constructed will be back. Because again, this team still has an issue shooting the ball. They still can't really shoot. So, and on top of that, they're about to get an extremely expensive team that can't really shoot the ball. Yo, do you know how many times I saw Kyle Anderson taking the slowest 3-point shots, and I think a couple of them airballed? Like, come on now, bro. Shouts out to shouts out to the Dallas Mavericks for making the NBA Finals. And again, I'll give my predictions on Wednesday's episode. Let's move forward. I do want to say shouts out and congratulations to Jaylen Waddle for, I think, agreeing to an extension or a new contract with the Dolphins. I think it's rumored to be 3 years, $84 million or something like $85 million or something like that. I think obviously this is a new age of sports and a new age of paying players, and obviously Tua is going to get whatever he's asking for, especially from this Dolphins team, seeing as though they don't really have there's not really a direction that they can go that can find someone that's better than Tua, or someone that's out there that's better than Tua. On top of that, Tua's good. He's not great, but he's good. I do think that this kind of puts a spotlight on the lack of success that the Dolphins have seen over the last few years, and the fact of I think this puts a negative light on the Dolphins in a certain sense. Jaylen Waddle he's getting paid like he's one of the best, and he is one of the best receivers in the league. And the fact that you're not even receiver number 1 on your team should show you just the abundance of talent on this team and the abundance of talent that they've had on this team. I'm not even mentioning Odell Beckham Jr., who's there now. So you've had all this talent, and now you're about to play a quarterback that's been there that hasn't capitalized on this talent. Again, Tyreek Hill is the number 1 receiver on this team, and Jaylen Waddle is the second receiver. And Jaylen Waddle is one of the best receivers in football. I just think that this kind of speeds up the clock and speeds up the expectations for the Dolphins. It's like you can't have such a potent offense and have nothing to show for it. So I think people are going to look at two, and honestly, I don't foresee, much success with this team. I could be wrong, obviously, but I don't see Miami. I mean, they still have to prove that they can play in the cold, outdoors. So I do think that Jaylen Waddle deserves this contract. Shouts out to him. I do think that he's one of those players that if he played on a different team, if he was the number one option on a different team, he would be a star. Even though he is a star now, it's just you're playing on a team next to Tyreek Hill, who is arguably the best wide receiver in the league. But I just think that this shines a weird light and an interesting light on the lack of success that Jaylen Waddle has seen with Tua. I think this shines a bad light on Tua, not really as much as the whole team, but Tua. Again, I think Tua is going to get his money. They really have no options. I kind of feel the same way about Dallas and Dak Prescott. Tua has all the leverage. Dak Prescott has all the leverage. I just do think it looks bad on Tua's case that, all right, you have one of the highest paid receivers in the league, and he's not even your number one option. And yet and still, anytime it gets below 50 degrees, you just struggle mightily, So, yeah, I think that this puts because obviously, again, Tua is probably going to get paid soon. This definitely puts a different lens on the Dolphins. I'm sorry. But shouts out to Jaylen Waddle for getting his payment. Shouts out for Jaylen Waddle for getting his new deal. Definitely deserved. And lastly, before we go, I have the unpopular topic of the day. We just talked about Minnesota, and we just talked about Minnesota Timberwolves, and we just talked about how a lot of people are saying, we're going to be back. We're going to be back. We're going to be back. And I'm saying, hey, pump the brakes on that. Pump the brakes on you being back. Well, remember a team that we also said would be back and has not been back since? That team is the Cincinnati Bengals. Why are they the subject of my unpopular topic of the day segment? Well, because OTAs have started and training camps and everything have started, and two very notable exclusions from, or no-shows, I'll say, from OTAs and camps is T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, the two otherworldly wide receivers for the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously, it's contract based. We've heard all season about the back and forth that T. Higgins has had with the Bengals, expressing the want of a new contract. And Jamar Chase hasn't been as loud as T. Higgins, but Jamar Chase also is a person that is looking for a new contract. I'm not saying that you give, T. Higgins whatever he wants, you give Jamar Chase whatever he wants. Obviously, this is all a business, and you have to do what's smart for yourself, and they have to do what's smart for them, But I do want to express and show you that when that window is open, you have to capitalize on it. And there are times when that window, it may take a while for that to open. Because let me be honest with you. Since the Bengals have been to the Super Bowl, Joe Burrow has seen a couple injuries. They lost to Kansas City Chiefs. They have the situation with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase now. Tyler Boyd's not there anymore. Joe Mixon's not there anymore. And while the loudest person as far as trying to get a contract situation is T. Higgins, they also have, I think Henderson is going through a contract situation with them. I understand that Joe Burrow's good, cool. But let's not forget, Joe Burrow, how do I say this? The best we've seen of Joe Burrow has been alongside some superstar players like Jamar Chase, like Justin Jefferson when he was at LSU, like Jamar Chase, like T. Higgins, like Tyler Boyd, like Joe Mixon. I don't know if Joe Burrow is good enough to overcome not having his one or first or second best wide receiver, especially losing wide receivers like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I think this is just the fear, man. For all they'll be back when. That's kind of, I'm still holding out hope, but that's kind of how I feel about the Ravens last year. You had the defense, you had everything, and you lost. And now you look, the offensive line is much worse than it was a year ago. The defense is much worse than it was a year ago, even though the defense is still good. They have Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton. They have great players. They just don't have I don't think they'll have the historic defense. And this is yet another year of Lamar Jackson. So I don't think you really have the room to play with T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, man. They need to get a deal done in soon, because if not, it's going to get shaky. And as we've seen since the Super Bowl, the Cincinnati Bengals haven't been back since. Like I said. And there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve, or joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate everyone that supports, everyone that is subscribed. If you like the content that you hear, if you're this far and not subscribed, I don't know what to tell you, man. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. Again, I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible, and anything helps, so I appreciate you guys. Also, I know there's some people that only listen on DSPs, and there's some people that only watch on YouTube. So for my DSP listeners, whether that's Apple Music or a podcast, whether that's Spotify, whether that's SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcast, please follow, please subscribe. It definitely means a lot. I appreciate everyone that supports me. And if you are someone that doesn't really care about the YouTube and just cares about the DSPs, again, I appreciate you as well. Please, please, please follow and subscribe. It means a lot. Also, follow the socials. Follow Instagram. Follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily there. A lot of the reels that I put on YouTube, I have to cut them down to a minute. A lot of times they're longer than a minute, much longer than a minute. If you want to see the entire reel, go to my TikTok, go to my Instagram, and you can watch it there. That's also a place where we can debate. That's probably the fastest place you can get to me. We can debate. We can go back and forth. You can tell me how much you love my content. You can tell me how much you hate my content. Just keep it respectful, and I don't mind it. Hey, I appreciate your opinions. And just please follow the socials. It means a lot. Until next time, much love.